In the distant corners of the galaxy, a coalition of alien species known as the Tyrannical Dominion had grown to dominate the universe. For centuries, their iron-fisted rule spread across star systems, crushing civilizations beneath the weight of their oppressive laws and vast military might. The Dominion was led by an elite council of ruthless beings from different worlds, all sharing a singular vision: absolute control over every sentient species. To enforce their power, they had constructed colossal fleets of warships and deployed terrifying weapons of mass destruction that could obliterate entire planets in seconds. Among the galaxies they conquered was Earth. The humans, once a young and primitive race, had drawn the attention of the Dominion after their rapid technological advancements and their bold spirit. The tyrants had believed Earth's inhabitants would be easy to subjugate, but they underestimated one thing: humanity's unwavering will to fight. It was only a matter of time before the humans realized the true cost of their submission. Earth's leaders, initially divided on how to approach the Dominion's sudden arrival, soon recognized the desperate need for unity. At first, the alien invaders promised peace, offering Earth a place in the Dominion as subjugated citizens. But their hollow words were quickly revealed for what they were: lies meant to manipulate and subdue the human spirit. And so, with the first act of defiance, a small but powerful rebel cell targeting Dominion forces in a surprise attack, the war began. The first battles were chaotic, as the humans learned the full extent of the Dominion's brutal might. Vast armadas of starships blotted out the stars, and ground forces, made up of horrific alien creatures and well-trained soldiers, began a relentless campaign to crush the human resistance. Many thought Earth would fall within months. The odds were overwhelmingly stacked against them. Humanity faced not just one enemy, but an entire galactic empire with untold resources. But Earth's warriors were not easily defeated. Despite their apparent lack of advanced technology compared to the Dominion, the humans fought with something the tyrants did not expect: ingenuity. They were adaptable, learning from every skirmish, every loss, and every piece of alien tech they could capture. A small group of elite military commanders quickly rose to prominence, among them General Roderick Barnes, a former soldier turned insurgent leader, and Captain Ayumi Takahashi, a brilliant strategist whose tactical prowess became legendary. Barnes was known for his cold, calculated strikes, always willing to make the tough decisions that others feared to take. His tactics baffled the Dominion, forcing them to constantly readjust their approach. Takahashi, on the other hand, had a different gift. She was a master of understanding the flow of battle, capable of predicting enemy movements and countering them before they even happened. She had an uncanny ability to turn the tide in any engagement, and under her leadership, Earth's resistance grew stronger with each victory. The human resistance built a reputation across the galaxy, inspiring other oppressed species to join the fight. The first crack in the Dominion's facade appeared and a key planetary system fell to the humans, a victory so unexpected that it sent shockwaves through the galactic elite. What had once seemed like a hopeless cause now seemed like a burgeoning rebellion, a rebellion that could change the very balance of power in the galaxy. But with every victory, the Dominion's fury only intensified. In response to the humans' audacity, the Dominion unleashed their deadliest weapon, a massive space station capable of eradicating entire fleets with a single shot. They dubbed it the Doom Star, and its arrival was heralded by the most terrifying display of military power the universe had ever witnessed. The Doom Star made its way toward Earth, its massive engines lighting up the stars as it neared the planet's orbit. The humans, though weary and battered, refused to back down. General Barnes and Captain Takahashi met with their fellow commanders in a secure underground base, discussing strategies, but deep down, they both knew that this new weapon could very well be their end. The tyrants underestimated humanity's greatest strength: their refusal to surrender, their undying will to survive. Despite their formidable enemies, humanity stood firm. And as the Doom Star entered Earth's atmosphere, the question on everyone's mind was no longer whether they could defeat the Dominion, but rather, how far they were willing to go to fight for their future. Would this be humanity's final stand, or would they rise up against impossible odds and show the galaxy that even the most powerful empire could not crush the indomitable spirit of Earth's warriors? The battle for the galaxy had only just begun. As the Doom Star loomed over Earth, its devastating power cast a long shadow across the planet. The human resistance knew that their days were numbered unless they could somehow neutralize the massive weapon. The Doom Star was not just a symbol of the Dominion's power, it was the harbinger of Earth's doom. General Roderick Barnes and Captain Ayumi Takahashi were already formulating a daring plan. Earth's existing defenses were minimal compared to the Dominion's vast arsenal, and the planet's military was no match for the Doom Star in its current form. Time was running out, but there was a glimmer of hope. Takahashi had recently acquired valuable intelligence, a hidden weakness in the Doom Star's structure, buried deep within its core. The intelligence came from a captured Dominion officer, who had defected after witnessing the brutality of the regime firsthand. He had offered the humans a sliver of opportunity. The Doom Star's power source, while nearly invulnerable from the outside, could be disrupted by a precise strike from within. But to do so, they would need to infiltrate the starship, bypass its security, and strike before the weapon could fire. The problem? The Doom Star was heavily guarded by Dominion forces, elite warriors and machines designed to eliminate any intruders on sight. But Earth's finest soldiers weren't deterred. In the shadows of their underground command centers, a group of human volunteers began to prepare for what would be the most dangerous mission ever undertaken, an infiltration of the Doom Star itself. Barnes, aware of the stakes, handpicked a small group of warriors, each one a seasoned combatant, capable of feats of agility and stealth. Leading the assault would be Lieutenant Maria Costa, an expert in sabotage and close-quarter combat. Her reputation for getting in and out of the most dangerous places was unrivaled. Alongside her was Sergeant Jacob Torres, a former demolitionist turned scout, whose ability to read and navigate alien technology was invaluable. They were joined by a small team of engineers, hackers, and medics, each one carefully selected for their unique skills. The plan was set into motion under the cover of a violent space battle. Human forces, aided by their growing coalition of alien allies, launched a series of diversionary strikes across the Dominion's fleet. As the Dominion scrambled to respond, Costa and her team slipped aboard the Doom Star, utilizing stealth technology they had reverse-engineered from Dominion ships. They were in enemy territory now, an enormous fortress of steel and energy, where every corridor was designed to kill. Inside the Doom Star, the team faced challenges greater than they had anticipated. They encountered automated security systems, including drones, laser grids, and defensive turrets. Each obstacle forced them to rely on their wits and training. Sergeant Torres hacked into control panels, taking down the systems one by one, while Costa and her team cleared the way, taking down guards with swift, silent strikes. But the deeper they went, the more dangerous the mission became. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Barnes and Takahashi oversaw the final preparations for the inevitable counterattack. The Dominion had positioned their forces just outside Earth's orbit, ready to crush the human resistance in one final blow. The humans had no illusions about the outcome of this war. If the Doom Star was not destroyed, Earth would fall. As the infiltration team reached the core of the Doom Star, they found themselves surrounded by an army of Dominion elite guards. These were no ordinary soldiers, these were the Dominion's best, genetically engineered for strength, speed, and loyalty. The humans had one chance to succeed, and it would come down to a brutal, close-quarters battle that tested their very limits. In the heart of the Doom Star, Costa and her team made their move, planting explosives at key points in the ship's power core. They had only moments before the alarms went off, and their position was compromised. The battle became a desperate race against time as they fought off the Dominion's fiercest warriors, knowing the explosion they had set would obliterate the ship if they could just survive long enough. Outside, the battle raged on. The human fleet, in coordination with their alien allies, held off wave after wave of Dominion ships, stalling the enemy long enough to allow Costa's team a chance to complete their mission. General Barnes had personally led a charge against Dominion forces, sacrificing much of his own fleet to ensure the Doom Star's defenses were occupied. Back inside the Doom Star, the final countdown began. The explosives planted by Costa and her team had activated, and the power core began to destabilize. The humans had mere minutes to escape. But as they made their way back through the ship's corridors, they encountered the final obstacle, the Dominion's supreme commander, Commander Voker. Voker was a towering figure, half machine, half alien, with cybernetic enhancements that made him nearly indestructible. He stood in their path, his eyes glowing with the malice of a tyrant. "You think you can defeat the Dominion?" Voker sneered, drawing a massive energy blade from his side. "You are nothing. This galaxy will burn, and you will die with it." Costa's heart raced as she charged toward him, but she knew this wasn't just about fighting to survive anymore. It was about something more, the future of humanity. The fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. With a swift movement, Costa dodged Voker's deadly strikes, using every ounce of her training and every shred of her willpower. The battle for Earth's survival came down to this final confrontation. Would they defeat the commander and escape in time, or would the Doomstar's destructive power claim them all?
The clash between Lieutenant Maria Costa and Commander Voker was nothing short of catastrophic. The cold, metallic corridors of the Doomstar became a deadly arena where every strike could mean life or death. Voker, a half-machine, half-alien monstrosity, towered over Costa, his energy blade crackling with a deadly hum. His every move was precise, calculated, and devastating. The sheer force behind his attack sent shockwaves through the walls, rattling the very foundation of the ship. But Costa was undeterred. She had faced impossible odds before, and she wasn't about to let the fate of Earth, and the galaxy, be decided by a tyrant. With a swift roll, she evaded Voker's massive blade, feeling the heat of the energy weapon as it sliced through the air where she had just been. Her team wasn't far behind, each member of the group fighting with equal ferocity against the Dominion's guards who continued to swarm in, knowing that the clock was ticking. "I will enjoy watching your species burn," Voker spat, his voice dripping with venom as he advanced on Costa. He lunged forward, his blade aimed directly at her heart. But Costa was faster. In one fluid motion, she dropped to the floor, avoiding the strike and grabbing one of the explosive charges that had been strapped to her belt. She activated it with a grim smile and tossed it toward the commander's feet. The charge was a high-tech incendiary device, designed to burn through even the toughest armor. It detonated just inches from Voker's legs, engulfing him in flames. Voker howled in agony as the fire seared through his cybernetic enhancements. Costa took her chance and launched herself into a rolling kick, knocking him back momentarily, buying her just enough time to regain her footing. She had to end this quickly, or they would all perish in the explosion. "Escape," she shouted to her team, her voice strained as she turned to face the crumbling structure around them. The countdown had already begun, and the power core of the Doom Star was beginning to destabilize. They didn't have much time left. Despite the damage to his body, Voker wasn't finished. He rose to his feet, flames licking at his mechanical limbs, his eyes burning with cold hatred. He wasn't the type to let an enemy escape, especially not one who had humiliated him in such a way. But Costa had anticipated this. As she drew back her combat knife, she glanced toward the retreating members of her team, knowing that the only way they'd make it out alive was if she kept Voker distracted long enough. "You won't stop us," she hissed through gritted teeth, preparing for one final confrontation. Suddenly, a blinding light flashed down the corridor. Costa squinted, disoriented for a moment. Then she realized what was happening. The explosives had triggered a chain reaction in the Doom Star's core. The entire ship was starting to collapse around them. This wasn't a battle for survival anymore, it was a race to escape before everything was obliterated. The rest of her team scrambled for the nearest exit, but Costa remained locked in battle with Voker, now circling him like a predator closing in on its prey. He swung his blade one last time, but Costa dodged and ducked under his strike, driving her knife into the exposed circuitry of his chest. She twisted it, sending sparks flying as the cybernetic enhancements malfunctioned. With a guttural scream, Voker fell to the ground, his body collapsing like a sack of metal and flesh. Costa didn't wait to see if he was dead, she was already running, her mind focused solely on survival. The corridors seemed to stretch endlessly as she sprinted toward the escape pods, the rumbling and shaking of the ship growing louder with every passing second. She could feel the heat from the power core's explosion on her heels, and the once pristine, steel walls of the Doom Star were now collapsing in on themselves. Every corner, every turn, could be the last. Her heart pounded in her chest as she leaped through a blast door just as it sealed behind her. The escape pod was waiting, a small, sleek vessel designed to get them off the Doom Star quickly. Her team had already entered, and the pod was primed for launch. "Come on, Costa." Sergeant Torres shouted through the comms, his voice frantic. "Hurry." Costa didn't look back. She pushed her aching body to its limit, diving into the escape pod just as the door slammed shut behind her. With a final burst of adrenaline, she pressed the launch button. The pod shot forward, breaking free from the Doom Star's gravitational pull just as the massive ship began to implode. In an instant, the Doom Star, the symbol of the Dominion's dominance, exploded into a brilliant, fiery ball of destruction. The shockwave reverberated through the space around them, throwing the escape pod into an uncontrollable spin. For a few heart-stopping moments, the pod tumbled wildly through the void. Costa held her breath, her hands tightly gripping the controls as she fought to regain control. After what felt like an eternity, the pod steadied, and the crew let out a collective sigh of relief. They had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. As the pod drifted away from the wreckage of the Doom Star, Costa and her team looked out at the vastness of space. Earth was still far away, but they could see the flickering lights of human ships engaged in battle with the remaining Dominion forces. The galaxy, once dominated by the tyrannical Dominion, was starting to shift. Costa knew that this victory, though significant, was just the beginning. They had struck a massive blow against their oppressors, but the war was far from over. As the human resistance began to rally, and other oppressed species rose up, they would need to stand ready for the next phase of their fight. For now, they had survived the worst, and Earth's warriors had proven one undeniable truth: humanity would never be subjugated. They would rise, they would fight, and they would win.
The explosion of the Doom Star had sent shockwaves not only through the galaxy but also through the Dominion itself. For the first time in centuries, the once mighty empire found itself in disarray. The loss of their greatest weapon was a blow to their morale, and the ripple effects of the humans' audacity reverberated through the farthest reaches of their territory. Yet, the Dominion was not one to fall easily, and its leaders were determined to quash this rebellion with ruthless efficiency. In the aftermath of the destruction, General Barnes and Captain Takahashi gathered their forces, still reeling from the intensity of the mission's success. Earth's resistance had suffered heavy losses, but they had won a crucial victory. The Doom Star, the weapon that had been built to crush the human spirit, was gone, but the fight was far from over. Back on Earth, Barnes addressed the growing resistance. His voice rang out in a secure command center, where soldiers, engineers, and civilians who had long supported the cause had gathered. There was no time for celebrations. The Dominion had countless resources and the ability to rebuild their forces. Yet, for the first time in the war, Barnes saw something different in the eyes of his people: hope. "We've dealt them a blow, yes," Barnes began, his tone solemn but determined. "But this war isn't over. They will come for us with everything they've got. We need to prepare for what's coming next. We need to unite not just Earth, but every system we can. The galaxy is watching us. And it's up to us to show them that humanity is no longer afraid." Captain Takahashi stood beside him, her mind already racing through the possible next moves. "We've secured key victories, but now we need to leverage our alliances," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "There are more oppressed species out there. If we can unite them, we can shift the balance of power in our favor." Barnes nodded. "Exactly. The Dominion is built on fear, on division. But humanity doesn't bend to that kind of control. We've already proven that we can fight and win. Now, we need to inspire the rest of the galaxy to rise with us." It wasn't just talk. The human resistance began to push forward with renewed vigor, forming alliances with the fractured species that had long suffered under the Dominion's thumb. From the reptilian Valorii, who had been enslaved for generations, to the gaseous Gernari, whose worlds had been decimated in the Dominion's quest for dominance, humans reached out with a message of defiance and unity. Together, they would topple the tyrants. The coalition was fragile at first, each race bringing their own history, culture, and distrust of the humans. Some questioned whether they could truly rely on the humans to lead the charge, given how recently they had become part of the galactic stage. Others were hesitant, fearful that they would only be used as pawns in a human-led war. Yet, time and again, Earth's warriors proved their worth. General Barnes led successful strikes alongside their new allies, showing them that they could count on humanity as comrades, not conquerors. Captain Takahashi worked tirelessly, coordinating efforts between alien forces and Earth's military, forging bonds of trust that would become vital in the battles ahead. But the Dominion was far from done. As the galaxy began to rally behind humanity's banner, the Dominion's leaders enacted their most desperate measures. Commander Volker, though presumed dead, had only been one part of a much larger, more insidious plan. His failure had not been in vain. He had been part of a larger strategy to prepare for the inevitable counteroffensive, one that would involve their most terrifying weapon yet, the Harbinger. The Harbinger was a weapon unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The Dominion scientists had fused dark energy with biological warfare, creating a creature that was part living being, part weapon of mass destruction. It had the power to annihilate entire fleets, to reduce planets to smoldering ashes, and to breed fear in even the most hardened warriors. News of the Harbinger spread quickly, and the resistance was on edge. Humanity's recent victory had sparked a fire, but now that fire was being smothered by the overwhelming threat of an even more destructive force. "We need to move fast," Barnes said, the gravity of the situation weighing heavily on him as he and Takahashi studied the intelligence reports. "We can't afford to wait for the Harbinger to arrive. We need to strike first." The human resistance, alongside their alien allies, began to prepare for a full-scale assault on the Dominion stronghold, a massive space station at the heart of their empire, from where the Harbinger was being housed. The battle would be unlike anything they had faced before. Their forces were divided, their resources limited, and the stakes higher than ever. But the human spirit burned brighter than the odds stacked against them. Takahashi's voice was filled with resolve. "If we can take down the Harbinger before it reaches full strength, we'll break the Dominion's back. We need to hit them hard, fast, and decisively. This is it. If we win this battle, the galaxy will see what we're capable of." The final phase of the war was beginning. Human warriors, now united with their alien allies, began assembling a fleet. It was a ragtag coalition, composed of Earth's best, the alien forces who had pledged their loyalty, and the remnants of species who had long been oppressed. Together, they would challenge the Dominion's most lethal weapon and show the galaxy that unity, rather than fear, was the true path to victory. Barnes and Takahashi knew the coming battle would be one of unimaginable bloodshed, but they also knew it was their best chance to bring the fight to the Dominion's doorstep. The universe would either tremble before the tyranny of the Dominion, or bow to the unstoppable force of the United Galaxy. But first, they had to win the battle of their lives. And in that final, desperate gamble, they had to rely on what humanity had always relied on, their ingenuity, their resilience, and their unbreakable will. The fleet was ready. Earth's finest ships, alongside their alien allies, had assembled in the far reaches of space, prepared to face the greatest threat humanity had ever known, the Harbinger. Every soldier, every officer, and every crew member understood the stakes. The survival of the galaxy, and the preservation of freedom itself, hinged on the success of this mission. General Barnes stood before the massive war room projection, his eyes scanning the faces of his commanders. They were an eclectic group, humans, Valorii, Gernari, and others who had been brought together by a common purpose. They all carried the weight of this war on their shoulders, but there was an unmistakable sense of camaraderie now, an understanding that they were not just fighting for their own homes but for each other. "Everyone knows what's at stake," Barnes said, his voice firm yet tinged with urgency. The Harbinger is unlike anything we've ever faced. It's not just a weapon, it's a living force of destruction. And if we don't stop it, the Dominion will reign over us all. Captain Takahashi stepped forward, her face unwavering as she laid out the plan. Our objective is clear. We hit the Dominion stronghold before the Harbinger is fully deployed. We strike fast, hit their weak points, and disable the station's defenses. We have only one shot at this. The longer we wait, the more time the Dominion has to finish the Harbinger and bring it into full force. She paused, letting the gravity of their mission sink in before continuing. We'll split into 3 strike teams. One will focus on the outer defense perimeter, neutralizing Dominion reinforcements and keeping them occupied. The second team will infiltrate the stronghold, disabling their weapons and power sources. The third will target the Harbinger itself. If we can take it down, the Dominion's reign is over. The plan was audacious, but it was the only option they had. Time was running out, and every moment counted. The Resistance had gathered its forces, and the fleet was prepared for one final, decisive battle. The ships jumped into hyperspace, streaking toward the Dominion stronghold. As they neared their target, the vastness of the space station came into view, an imposing structure of metal and energy, surrounded by a fleet of Dominion warships. This would not be an easy fight, but Barnes had no illusions about what was at stake. As the Resistance ships approached the station's outer defenses, the Dominion fleet began to mobilize. The Harbinger, still encased in the heart of the station, would soon be unleashed. But the Resistance wasn't waiting for the perfect moment, they were making their own. All units, prepare for battle. Barnes barked into the comms, his voice carrying the weight of command. We breach the defenses, we push forward, and we take the fight to them. With a massive burst of energy, the fleet engaged. The first wave of Dominion ships fired relentlessly, but the Resistance fleet's superior agility and strategy allowed them to weave through the firestorm. Plasma bolts and energy beams lit up the void of space, colliding in brilliant flashes as both sides fought for dominance. Captain Takahashi's squadron cut through the Dominion's defense line, striking fast and hard, keeping the enemy fleet occupied. Their goal was simple: hold the line long enough to allow the main assault teams to get through and infiltrate the station. Meanwhile, General Barnes and his forces led the charge into the station's interior. They knew time was of the essence, and they made their way through the corridors of the stronghold, a maze of steel and energy. Every room they cleared brought them closer to the Harbinger, but it also brought them closer to danger. Dominion soldiers, automated defenses, and the very structure of the station itself fought to prevent them from reaching their goal. "We're almost there," Barnes said, his voice steady over the comms, as he led his team through the station's darkened corridors. "Keep moving, nothing stops us now." But as they pressed on, the true nature of the Dominion's desperation became clear. The station began to shake violently, alarms blaring as emergency systems kicked in. The Harbinger was coming online. The team encountered their first major obstacle when they reached the central core of the station. Dominion elite soldiers, clad in advanced exoskeletons and armed with devastating weaponry, ambushed them. The fight was brutal, hand-to-hand combat mixed with precision gunfire and explosive blasts. It was a struggle for survival as the team fought their way through, desperate to reach the heart of the station. "Push through. We're almost there," shouted Sergeant Torres, his voice gruff but determined as he gunned down a group of Dominion soldiers blocking the hallway. The walls trembled as the Harbinger's energy began to pulse throughout the station, its terrible power growing with every passing second. Barnes knew they were running out of time. If they didn't disable the Harbinger now, the destruction it would cause would be unimaginable. Finally, they reached the inner sanctum, a large chamber where the Harbinger lay encased in a cage of energy. The creature was a grotesque, shifting mass of darkness and energy, its body pulsing with raw, untamed power. It was part living being, part weapon, a grotesque hybrid of biological and technological nightmare. It was waking up. "Get to the core and disable its power feed," Barnes ordered. "This is our one shot." Takahashi's team, which had infiltrated the station's lower levels, was already on the move. They had one goal: to sabotage the Harbinger's power source before it could fully awaken. But the closer they got, the more the station seemed to fight back. Dominion forces, reinforcements, and automated drones flooded the chamber, determined to protect their weapon at all costs. Costa, now leading a small team to disrupt the Harbinger systems, exchanged a quick glance with Barnes. The countdown was already in progress. Every second counted. "We have to end this now," Costa shouted as she and her team fought their way through the throngs of enemy soldiers. The battle in the core was fierce, the resistance members fighting not only to destroy the Harbinger but to survive long enough to escape the collapsing station. Just as they reached the power core, Takahashi made the call. "Now," she yelled, and a series of explosive charges were set off across the chamber. The Harbinger's power system destabilized with a deafening roar, and the creature's energy field flickered. In that moment, everything seemed to pause. The Harbinger, once a near unstoppable force, was on the verge of collapse. But just as the creature began to howl in rage, a series of devastating explosions rocked the station, sending a shockwave through the entire facility. The Harbinger was done. But so, it seemed, was the station. With no time to spare, the resistance forces began their frantic retreat. The battle for the galaxy was far from over, but in that moment, they had struck a crippling blow to the Dominion's most feared weapon. The tide of war had turned. The destruction of the Harbinger was a seismic event that rippled throughout the galaxy. As the weapon that had been humanity's greatest fear lay in ruins, the shockwaves of its annihilation sent the Dominion's war machine into disarray. Their greatest threat had been neutralized, and their once impervious stronghold now lay in ruins, collapsing into the void of space. The Resistance had scored a decisive victory, but it was far from over. The Dominion still controlled vast swathes of the galaxy, and they would not fall without a fight. As the Resistance fleet pulled back from the wreckage of the Dominion stronghold, the fleet's commanders gathered once more in the war room aboard the flagship Rising Dawn. The atmosphere was tense, but there was an undeniable sense of triumph in the air. They had won a major victory, but now the real test began, to finish what they had started. General Barnes stood at the head of the table, his face lined with fatigue but also with determination. The Harbinger is gone, and the Dominion is on the back foot. But we can't stop here. We've hit them hard, but they'll try to rally. We need to strike decisively and ensure they can't recover. Captain Takahashi nodded. We've proven that the Dominion is not invincible. But they still have a powerful fleet, and they still control key territories. We can't let them regroup. If we want this war to end, we need to dismantle their command structure. We have to take the fight to their leadership. The focus of their next operation was clear. They would target the heart of the Dominion, the central command station where the most influential warlords and strategists remained. The time for fighting off Dominion forces in small skirmishes was over. It was time to break the Empire itself. The battle for the core. The Resistance fleet was ready to launch an all-out assault on the Dominion's central command station, a sprawling fortress orbiting a gas giant deep within enemy-controlled space. This was the final stronghold, the last remnant of the Dominion's power, and it was heavily fortified, surrounded by fleets of warships and countless automated defenses. Every step would be fraught with peril, but the war had reached a turning point. Victory was within their grasp. General Barnes addressed the fleet, his voice steady and resolute. This is it. We hit them hard and fast. Our target is the command center. Once we take that, the rest will fall. Let's show the galaxy that we will not be subjugated. The assault began with a furious barrage of energy blasts and missiles from the Resistance fleet, tearing into the outer defenses of the command station. The Dominion's response was swift and overwhelming. They launched wave after wave of warships to intercept the Resistance's advance. The battle in space was brutal, with explosions lighting up the void like fireworks, as fleets collided and fighters engaged in dogfights that stretched across light years. On the ground, the human and alien forces launched a daring infiltration mission. They would need to breach the outer perimeter of the station, navigate through its labyrinthine corridors, and confront the Dominion leadership, those who had orchestrated centuries of oppression and terror. Leading the charge were Costa and Takahashi, the two most trusted commanders in the resistance. They, along with a team of elite soldiers, were tasked with infiltrating the command center and disabling the Dominion's ability to coordinate their fleets. As they made their way through the station's heavy defenses, they encountered fierce resistance. The Dominion's elite guards, enhanced with cybernetic implants and armed with the latest weaponry, fought relentlessly to protect their leaders. It was a brutal, bloody conflict, but the resistance was relentless. Costa and Takahashi pushed forward, their minds focused on the ultimate goal, eliminating the Dominion's leadership. The final showdown. After hours of fierce fighting, the resistance reached the heart of the command center. There, they faced the final obstacle, the Dominion High Command. The leaders of the Dominion were gathered in a massive control room, surrounded by holographic displays and tactical consoles. These were the warlords who had led the galaxy to its darkest days. But now, they were cornered. At the head of the table was Supreme Commander Nihil, the architect of the Dominion's war machine. His face, half covered in cybernetic implants, was stern and calculating. He stood as the last symbol of the Dominion's unyielding rule. "You think you've won?" Nihil sneered as Costa and Takahashi stormed into the room, weapons raised. "You're nothing but an insect in the grand scheme of the galaxy. The Dominion cannot be defeated by a few pitiful humans." Costa's eyes burned with determination. "You were wrong from the start," she said, her voice unwavering. "We aren't insects. We're humanity. And we're done being ruled by tyrants like you." The final battle was a desperate, violent affair. Nihil's guards lunged at the resistance, their enhanced bodies moving with inhuman speed, but the humans and their allies were too determined. Costa and Takahashi fought side by side, pushing through the enemies with a focused intensity. Every strike, every move was calculated with one goal in mind, the downfall of the Dominion. Nihil himself was a formidable opponent, wielding a blade forged from a rare metal known only to the Dominion's highest elite. But even he could not withstand the onslaught. Costa, with a final, decisive blow, shattered Nihil's defense and brought him to his knees. "You may have been a tyrant," she said coldly, "but you're not invincible." With that, the last of the Dominion leadership was eradicated. The control room fell silent, save for the sound of the station's alarms as the final wave of resistance ended. General Barnes' voice echoed over the comms, announcing the victory: "The Dominion has fallen. We are free." The birth of a new galaxy. As the last remnants of the Dominion's empire crumbled, the resistance began the long process of rebuilding. The galaxy was no longer a place of oppression but one of possibility, where species once divided by fear and hatred could now unite under the banner of liberty and peace. Earth, once just another struggling world, now stood as a beacon of hope to the galaxy. The war had been long and brutal, but humanity had proved its strength and resilience. It had inspired countless civilizations to rise up and claim their freedom. In the months that followed, the resistance transformed into a governing body, working with alien species to forge a new galaxy, one where cooperation, not domination, would reign supreme. The scars of war would never fully fade, but the future was now open to new possibilities. Humanity, once a young and vulnerable species, had not only survived but had become a symbol of hope across the stars. The galaxy was theirs to shape, and they would do so with the lessons they had learned from the war. As General Barnes, Captain Takahashi, and Lieutenant Costa stood together on the observation deck of the Rising Dawn, they looked out at the stars, at a future full of hope and promise. "We did it," Takahashi said, her voice quiet but filled with pride. "Yeah," Barnes replied, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "We did." And for the first time in a long while, they allowed themselves to believe that the galaxy, though forever changed, was now a place where humanity's light would shine brightly for generations to come. The war was over. The Dominion, once an unbreakable force that ruled the galaxy through fear and oppression, had crumbled under the relentless might of Earth's warriors and their newfound allies. Their strongholds were dismantled, their fleets scattered, and their leaders slain. But while the battles had ended, the true challenge had only just begun. building something better in its place. General Barnes stood at the command deck of the Rising Dawn, gazing out at the stars. The galaxy had never felt so vast, so open. For the first time in centuries, the void was free from Dominion tyranny. But now came the delicate task of forging a new order, one that wouldn't fall into the same cycle of conquest and cruelty. Captain Takahashi joined him, her uniform still stained from the final battle. "Feels strange, doesn't it?" she said, her voice contemplative. "Fighting was the easy part. Now we have to make sure all of this actually meant something." Barnes nodded. "We won the war, but peace is a whole different beast. There are power vacuums, old grudges, and plenty of people who'll want to carve out their own empires in the chaos." Indeed, across the galaxy, the aftermath of the Dominion's fall was already unfolding. Some systems, long oppressed, erupted into joyous celebration. Others, used to the Dominion's rule, fell into lawlessness. And then there were those who had been collaborators, former allies of the Dominion who now scrambled to consolidate their power. The battlefields had changed, but the struggle for the future had just begun. The Galactic Summit. Recognizing the need for unity, the Resistance organized a historic gathering, the Galactic Summit, on an independent world untouched by the war. Representatives from liberated planets, former Dominion territories, and neutral systems all converged, bringing with them hopes, fears, and deep-seated mistrust. Humanity, once dismissed as insignificant, now stood as the architects of this new order. Barnes, Takahashi, and Costa represented Earth, standing alongside their alien allies, those who had fought and bled beside them. The goal was simple: to ensure that no single power could ever again dominate the galaxy unchecked. The negotiations were tense. Some species sought vengeance against those who had once oppressed them. Others demanded reparations. Some feared humanity's newfound strength, whispering that Earth itself might become the next Dominion. But Barnes and his team remained steadfast, advocating for a coalition built on cooperation rather than conquest. It was Costa who delivered the speech that turned the tide. Standing before the gathered leaders, she spoke not as a soldier, but as someone who had seen firsthand the cost of tyranny. "We all lost something in this war," she said, her voice steady. "We lost friends, family, entire worlds. But we didn't fight just to replace one empire with another. We fought so that no species, no government, no single force could ever hold absolute power again. If we let fear and vengeance guide us now, we will only repeat the mistakes of the past. We need a new way forward, together." Her words resonated. Slowly, grudgingly, the factions found common ground. After weeks of debate, the first framework of the Galactic Accord was signed, a treaty that would establish an interstellar council, ensuring that power remained balanced among the stars. Humanity did not seek to rule, but they had proven they would fight to keep tyranny from rising again. The last remnants of the Dominion. Even as the new order took shape, there were still threats lurking in the shadows. The Dominion had been shattered, but not all of its remnants had surrendered. In the lawless edges of the galaxy, warlords and ex-Commander Nihil's former subordinates plotted their return. They gathered fleets, stockpiled weapons, and whispered of vengeance. A mission was put in motion. Covert teams, made up of human and alien operatives, were sent to hunt down the last Dominion strongholds before they could regroup. The war had ended, but the fight against oppression would never truly be over. A new era for humanity. Back on Earth, the homeworld that had once been seen as weak and primitive was now a legend across the stars. It was no longer an isolated world at the edge of space, it was a symbol of defiance, resilience, and the unbreakable will of its people. The soldiers who had fought for freedom returned home as heroes. Statues were erected, names were remembered, and stories were told of the battles that had shaped the future. But Earth did not seek to become an empire. Instead, they chose to stand as guardians, ensuring that no power, human or alien, could ever again wield unchecked dominion over the galaxy. General Barnes, Takahashi, and Costa stood on the balcony of a newly built coalition station, watching the first fleet of the Galactic Accord take formation. They had fought, they had bled, and they had won. But more than that, they had changed the course of history. So, Takahashi said, arms crossed. Think we'll ever get some peace and quiet? Barnes smirked. Maybe for a little while. But knowing humanity? We'll always find another fight worth having. Costa chuckled. As long as it's the right fight. And with that, humanity took its first steps into a future of its own making, not as conquerors, not as oppressors, but as the defenders of a galaxy that would never again kneel to tyranny. The stars were no longer ruled by fear. They belonged to the free.